Good evening and welcome to Empty Cloud Monastery. My name is Bhante Suddhāso, and this evening we'll be looking at another discourse from the Buddha. This is one from the Anguttara Nikaya, chapter 5, sutta number 48. So we'll start with paying homage to the Buddha, and then I'll read through the discourse, and I'll take any questions at the end. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. So this time we'll be looking at Anguttara Nikaya, chapter 5, sutta number 48, which is titled here the Alabbhanīyaṭhāna Sutta, which means unobtainable situations. So thana means a situation or circumstance. Labbhaniya means obtainable, and alabbhaniya therefore means not obtainable. So this is about 5 situations which cannot be obtained, which are not reachable. So the discourse begins. The Buddha says, "Monks, there are 5 things that cannot be attained by any contemplative or Brahmin or God or Mara or Brahma or by anyone in the world." What 5? The first one, he says, that someone liable to old age should not grow old. Second one, that someone liable to sickness should not get sick. That someone liable to death should not die. That someone liable to ending should not end. That someone liable to perishing should not perish. So these are 5 things which are unobtainable. So nobody in all of samsara, from the most ordinary beings all the way up to the highest devas, the highest deities and spirits. No one can stop the forces of old age, sickness, and death. No one can prevent these things from happening. So the Buddha then continues, he says, an uneducated commoner, in Pali that's asuttava patujana. Asuttava patujana means an ordinary person who has not heard the Dhamma. So he says, an uneducated commoner has someone, what is this? An uneducated commoner has someone liable to old age who grows old. Let me look at the Pali. Asuttavato patujanasa jara dhammang jirati. The translation is not quite right here. So it actually means that for, again, the uneducated ordinary person, there is the nature to get old. They have the characteristic of decay, of decrepitude, of aging. And the Buddha says, but they don't reflect on old age. So they don't contemplate the nature of aging in this way. It is not just me who is subject to old age and who grows old. But for as long as sentient beings come and go, pass away, and are reborn, they all are subject to old age, and they all grow old. So this first reflection is considering. It's like, well, first off, it's acknowledging, yes, I have the nature to get old, to decay, to become decrepit. So first is acknowledging that this is the reality of things. So the Buddha really encourages us to face reality, to face things as they are. And one of the things which we need to face is the reality of aging, the reality that we're not going to be young and fit forever, but rather it's normal that as time goes by, our mental and physical faculties decline. And as we get older and older, it's natural that we become increasingly decrepit, both physically and mentally. And then the second part of this contemplation is considering that it's not just us who have this, but actually it's everyone. So it's recognizing that this is the nature of all beings. So it's not some unique problem that only I have, but rather everyone has the same circumstance of being subject to old age and decrepitude. And the Buddha continues with the contemplation. So one should think, if I were to sorrow and wail and lament, beating my breast and falling into confusion, just because I am liable to old age and grow old, then I would lose my appetite and my physical appearance would deteriorate. My work would not get done. My enemies would be encouraged and my friends would be dispirited. And it continues. And so when someone subject to old age becomes old, they sorrow and wail and lament, beating their breast and falling into confusion. And the Buddha says, this is called an uneducated commoner struck by sorrow's poisoned arrow, who only mortifies themselves. So this again is the case of someone who, again, what we should be doing is to constantly reminding ourselves of the reality of old age and recognizing that there's no point in being upset about it. There's no point in wailing and crying and getting depressed about the fact that we're aging, the fact that we're becoming increasingly decrepit with every passing year, every passing minute, actually. Because again, as the reflection says here, like if we waste our time with getting depressed and sad about the reality of aging, then that's just going to make our life miserable. It's just going to make it harder for us to get by day. It's just going to make our life miserable for no good reason. And it will also tend to upset our friends. So the people who care about us will be disturbed by our own depression about something completely inevitable, namely getting old, decrepitude. So the Buddha here is saying, he's saying that the uneducated commoner, so the person who has not heard the Dhamma, who has not practiced the Dhamma, then they actually do tend to try to ignore the reality of aging, ignore the reality of decrepitude. And when they're forced to confront it, so either when a close loved one of theirs is going through decrepitude, or when they themselves become decrepit, then they become depressed and anguished and agitated and fall into confusion and despair. So this is why the Buddha says, an unlearned commoner is struck by sorrow's poisoned arrow who only torments themselves. So this, again, it's indicating that when we are unwilling to face the reality of aging and decrepitude, nonetheless, it still comes to us. But the fact that we're not prepared, it means it will strike us like being shot with a poisoned arrow. And it's only a form of self-torment. So this refusal to accept the reality of aging and decrepitude, it's just another form of self-torment. And then the Buddha makes the same statement about the next four. Again, we're subject to sickness, we're subject to death, we're subject to ending, we're subject to perishing. So everything that we have, so what's translated here is perishing, by the way. Nasana also means losing. So losing what we have, losing our possessions. And what he's translated here is ending as kaya, which also has the sense of exhaustion or diminishing. So there's a broader sense here. So it sounds like death, ending, and perishing are all synonyms in English, but in Pali it's quite clear these are three different words. So marana means dying, means death. Kaya means exhaustion or elimination. So it's, to me, the word kaya carries more the sense of being in a state of extreme deprivation, of not having energy, not having motivation. So more a sense of mental diminishment. And again, the final word nasana means losing or loss. So losing the things that you have, losing your possessions, losing your loved ones. So again, we should be reflecting that we're of the nature to get old and decrepit. We're of the nature to get sick. We're of the nature to die. We're of the nature to experience exhaustion, to experience depletion of our abilities. And we're also of the nature to experience loss, of losing everything that we love, everything that we cherish. And again, if we don't constantly reflect on these, if we don't come to full acceptance of these five realities, then what will happen is that when they hit us unexpectedly, then we'll be overwhelmed by sorrow and despair. So again, the same contemplation is applied to all 5 of these. But then the Buddha gives the opposite reflection for someone who is a learned disciple of the noble ones. So in Pali, that's Suttava Arya Savaka. So Suttava means one who has heard the Dhamma. And Arya Savaka means disciple of the noble ones, disciple of the Arya. So the Arya are the people who have attained some stage of awakening, the awakened ones. And Savaka means listener. So Arya Savaka means one who listens to the awakened ones. So a disciple of the awakened ones. So a learned disciple of the awakened ones, the noble ones, is liable to these same 5 things. They're liable to decrepitude, they're liable to sickness, they're liable to dying, they're liable to exhaustion, they're liable to loss. The difference here is that the learned disciple of the noble ones actually does reflect, continuously remind themselves that it's not just ourselves who have this nature, but everyone has this nature. And there's no point in getting upset about it. There's no point in harassing ourselves, tormenting ourselves about what's simply the nature of reality. But rather we come to full acceptance of it. So the Buddha says, so when someone liable to old age grows old, they do not sorrow and wail and lament, beating their breast and falling into confusion. And the Buddha says, this is called a learned disciple of the noble ones who has drawn out sorrow's poisoned arrow, struck by which uneducated ordinary people only torment themselves. And he says, sorrowless, free of thorns, that disciple of the noble ones attain complete nibbana, complete enlightenment. And he applies the same to the other 4 contemplations. So this here is emphasizing, once again, the value of constantly reflecting on the reality of these 5 things. Aging, sickness, death, exhaustion, and loss. And those who are familiar with the 5 daily contemplations will recognize that 4 of those map up directly to the 5 contemplations. So the 5 daily contemplations are the reality of aging, sickness, death, losing everything we love, and the 5th one is experiencing the consequences of our karma. So this list of 5 is similar. We have aging, sickness, and death as the first 3. Loss is in the 5th place rather than the 4th. And instead of the contemplation on karma, instead there's the reflection on exhaustion, which is a interesting shift. So this particular sutta doesn't have the angle of karma. Instead, it's emphasizing losing what we are attached to. So losing everything that we're attached to, whether physical or mental. And again, emphasizing that these contemplations are to help us overcome sorrow, to purify the heart, and therefore to attain complete awakening, complete enlightenment. And then this particular discourse, it ends with a verse. The verse is interesting partly because it has very little to do with the content of the sutta itself, which is odd. Normally when there's a poem added at the end of a sutta, it's directly related to the same topic. In this case, it's actually a completely different topic, so I won't be going over it. So this is a few cases in the suttas where it appears that the poem was probably added later by later editors of the suttas. And one of the reasons why is because every now and then the added poem doesn't seem to correlate to the sutta content itself. This is one case of that. So at this time, we can respect the sutta with 3 sadhus, and then I'll see if there's any questions. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. So hello to all the people joining in online. Hello to Rick, Julie, Leilani, Maria, Jayanta, Yankee, Norma, Edward, and Marielle. Welcome. And Norma says, it sounds like part of the 5 recollections. Yeah, as I was just mentioning, there's a strong overlap with the 5 recollections. The first 3 are identical, and then the one on loss is similar. Yeah, so strong overlap. I don't see any questions online though. Any questions here? No? So that might be it for this evening. So if there's no questions, then we can go ahead and conclude it this time with 3 more sadhus. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And we'll see you all next time.